How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another episode of the Barely There podcast. It is actually a little bit of a milestone. It is episode 50
I
of
noticed
the
that as
Barely There
well.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're moving up in the world. We're kind of getting a little bit of a catalog together. Thank you, as always, for everyone joining us. If you like what you're listening to, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you want to join the conversation, head over to YouTube. We already have Unknown Pro, just an absolute loser in the YouTube comment sections. If you want to be a better person than him, for sure, head on in and join. Subscribe if you like what you hear. I'm Duke Coughlin. You can follow me at that pod guy Duke on Twitter. As always, I'm joined by Lucas Perfetti. You can follow him at Lucas Perfetti 46. Also, be sure to follow the podcast page at Barely There Pod. Lucas, it is draft season. The last time we were on here, we talked quite a bit about the first round. We actually talked about the first round almost ad nauseum. But I do think we got a lot of good stuff accomplished there as well, as far as like trading down, who we might take at the number 9 overall pick. This episode will be a little bit more focused on the top 103 picks that we have. Pick 9 currently, pick 53, pick 61, pick 64, and pick 103. We will probably dive into the later part of that draft as we get along a little bit farther in the process. But Lucas, before we dive into that, first of all, how are you doing? Go ahead and drop me. How is Lucas Perfetti doing on this fine Thursday night?
I'm fantastic. No, I'm happy we finally get to talk about the draft, like for a full episode. I'm pretty pumped about that. Let's just jump right the fuck in, dude. I'm ready.
All right, perfect. Well, just jumping right in, as you say, before we dive headfirst into some of these mid-round picks that we're going to be looking at, I would be remiss if we did not bring up kind of the lingering discussion about Jalen Carter that's continuing to happen. I feel like through most of the draft cycles, you end up running into this guy that you kind of start talking about early on. You kind of look at it as maybe a little bit of a pipe dream, especially once you trade down in a draft. You kind of have a little bit of idea. It's like, well, if it falls there, maybe that'll be something we consider. But it just feels like Jalen Carter's name just continues to be attached to the Chicago Bears. Adam Schefter tweeted out a couple days ago, Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter is visiting the Bears today. It is his second visit with him, already having visited the Eagles. Carter's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said he is declining visit requests for any team drafting outside the top 10 picks. I'm confident Jalen will go in the top 10, Rosenhaus said. He's a good person, a family man, loves football, and is a generational talent. Carter was invited and plans to attend the NFL draft later this month in Kansas City. Now, that could be taken as, okay, Adam Schefter tweeting out about Jalen Carter, kind of broad. Drew Rosenhaus, obviously his agent, hyping him up. And if you know who Drew Rosenhaus is, you know the type of guy he is, hyping up any type of guy. This is the guy that defended Terrell Owens doing sit-ups in his fucking driveway. So, like, he's been around the block. But for some reason, and say what you want, whether you want the Bears to look at Jalen Carter or not, Jalen Carter continues to be tied to the Chicago Bears throughout this process. And a lot of people who kind of had this idea that the Bears were not interested, they really have to take a long look in the mirror after seeing that the visits are continuing to happen. That Ryan Poles has not shut this down by any stretch of the imagination. He can play a hyperbole in the media like a lot of GMs do, but it looks like it's still very much on the table. But now that I've gotten through that, Lucas, what's your opinion? What's your kind of read on the whole situation? I know you're a Jalen Carter guy like I am, but is this something that you think is a real possibility at this point?
I think it's not a possibility, but that's also because I think from the context clues I've gathered, he's not going to be there at 9. The reality is people were waiting for something else to happen like this Drew Rosenhaus declining any meetings with anyone outside of the top 10, right? I think that's brought it out again where it's like, fuck this fucking guy. Like, dude, the kid's 22. Like, stop freaking out on the internet about him, right? Like, definitely fucked up. And I think, as he pled no contest, that reality is a little bit of an admission of guilt, right? And like, we don't know his involvement. No one really does in what happened there, but it seems like something that NFL GMs are going to look past. And for the people that believe that Jalen Carter is not on the Bears draft board at all, like it's been taken off because he's too much of a risk for Ryan Poles, think it's pretty clearly documented with the 2 meetings that they're doing their due diligence, right? Like they might decide to take him off their board, but he's very much on the board right now. And Ryan Poles even kind of made a comment along those lines. I want to say it was during the meetings, the NFL owners meetings or whatever. Like I'm pretty sure during that time, the player that he was alluding to was Jalen Carter, and he pretty much said like, "Hey, I want to speak with Kevin Warren and I want to speak with George McCaskey about, you know, if player like are they going to fit into our culture? Like, essentially, are we willing to take this fucking risk, right?" And that kind of also throws another stone, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, at the idea of Kevin Warren not being involved in football affairs at all, right? Like he is going to be, and you should be happy that he is. I know that everyone wants Ryan Poles to be the football czar. And who is the dude we signed today? Defensive lineman. I think it's Green. He was from the Texans. He's a defensive end. At this point, like if you're trolling, I fucking love it because like they're like people are making hype up videos about like how he can't miss like signing a vet at minimum. Like that shit's hilarious to me because people really do act that way right now, right? And Poles is still very unproven. And I'm going to highlight on a couple things about the draft wise because this is probably my favorite part about him last year, and I hope he emulates partially what he did last year. But the reality is, dude, Kevin Warren and George McCaskey are involved in football affairs the same way Ted Phillips was. And if you don't think that the fucking bleeding starts at the top, like you got to cut off the head of the snake in order to fucking fix the problem or whatever. I don't know what the cliche is, but that's the reality with the Chicago Bears, right? Like George McCaskey is still involved in some decisions. Now, he's not sitting there evaluating guys and going to fucking TCU's pro day or Oklahoma State's pro day to see if someone's got good bend around the edge, right? But like on matters like this, they're going to prevent certain picks, right? Like you could easily see the Bears preventing the front office from drafting a quarterback in consecutive years after fucking up with Rex Grossman and having Aaron Rodgers there. Like, right? Like, oh no, we're going to take Cedric Benson, even though we already have TJ at the time. So it's just, you see what I'm saying? Like there's just some things there where clearly ownership can get involved, and it's mainly going to be because of the optics and not because of football decisions. And that's what fucking sucks. Because the McCaskies are a business first and they're a family run business. But that's just my tangent about the Bears overall, right? I just think the reality is like a lot of people were upset about the Drew Rosenhaus comments. Like Jalen Carter's a shitbag for not interviewing. Like Drew Rosenhaus went on Pat McAfee and was like, "Do you think I didn't entertain the idea of people that would move up to get him?" He was like, "I have talked to multiple teams, 6 teams in the top 10 that told me if Jalen Carter is there, I will be drafting him. So I'm not going to," he's pretty much said he's already been through a ton of shit with everything that happened between the combine, his pro day, the arrest, like everything that's gone on. He's like, "I'm not going to send my guy to go." He's like, "I'm preserving my client, right? Like I'm making sure he's in a good headspace. I'm not going to send him to go talk to the fucking Chargers who have no shot at drafting him." He's like, "I've done this with many clients before. If someone was seriously entertaining a trade up and had the ammo or the capacity to, I would do it." But he's like, it hasn't been with malicious intent. Like every guy that he's talked to that's outside of the top 10, it's like, "Hey, are you in striking distance? Do you think you can get here?" Like, I don't think you're going to be able to get him, right? So it's probably not worth the interview. And he pretty much brought up the point of New Orleans trading up for Chris Olave. Chris Olave didn't get met with by New Orleans, but they traded up to go get him still, right? So you don't need to have a top 30 visit in order to fucking get drafted. And I just feel like, listen, the kid fucked up. I get it. But like he's getting dragged really, really bad right now. Like he murdered someone with like shot them in the face, and it's just the shit hasn't come out yet. So I feel bad for the kid at this point.
Well, dude, and I really not to kind of jump in here, but like I really think with Jalen, you have to look at how he's reacted since all of this has happened and all this has gone public. And really, he's said all the right things. He's done all the right things. Say what you want about his pro day or the combine or anything like that. But I mean, he's kind of been a good soldier so far. You know what I mean? Like he's kind of kept his head down. He's stayed quiet. He's letting his agent do the talking because he doesn't feel like he needs to get like involved in anything like that. And he's always kind of come off the idea where it's like, I'm going to play hard for whoever drafts me, And I do think you hit on a couple big points there. most notably Kevin Warren's voice in the front office, that he's very much a football guy. Like, this isn't a situation where it's like,
And we
oh,
should be happy there's checks and balances in another football mind. Like, we've been asking for this hierarchy for a very fucking long
yeah,
time. Now, the second he gets hired, it's like, no, he's just doing the stadium. Like, bro,
no.
he's involved.
No, dude, this is the guy who ran the entire Big Ten. Like, let's be fucking real here. You're very much a sports guy. You know, does he think of optics? Probably, yeah, because you have to think of optics when you're running as something as big as a fucking college football conference. Because college football, in a lot of senses, is optics. They're trying to push away the idea that we are using these children or using these kids for fucking entertainment. We're making billions of dollars, and they're making money type thing. But that's conversation for another day. Regardless, Kevin Warren is very much a football guy, has a football background. I believe he was in the Minnesota Vikings front office before he went to the Big Ten. This is a guy who's going to have a lot of say in what happens. Like, it's that simple. And does that mean that he kind of nicks the idea of Jalen Carter? We don't know that. Is he a guy who's kind of has a vote of confidence for a guy like Jalen Carter? We don't know that. But it's nice to have that other guy in the room outside of a Ted Phillips who is only thinking of optics, outside of a guy like George McCaskey who is only thinking of optics. It's nice to have a guy who can look at a guy like Jalen Carter, see the talent that's on the field. And I've seen a lot of people arguing against Jalen Carter's talent on the field in the nicest way possible. I don't know if we're watching the same film, because when I watch him and look at like his responsibilities on a play-by-play basis, like, sure, he didn't have 16 and a half fucking sacks in college football in the SEC. Oh no. He's a guy who just absolutely torments the interior of a defense. But back to my original point, like, Kevin Warren being a football guy, he's someone who can't deny the talent. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's going to make this polarizing. And I think that's why he got a second visit. Is this maybe the Bears trying to get somebody off a scent? Very possible, because we've seen Ryan Poles kind of play that game where he wants people to kind of not know what the hell he's going to do heading into draft day. He even did that with the first overall pick. He didn't really tip his hand at all about the teams that were interested. You know what I mean? So it's a situation where it can't be denied that Jalen Carter is still in the conversation for the Chicago Bears, just because his name continues to be tied to it. And usually, as you like to say, Lucas, a lot, where there's smoke, there's fire. But at the same time, this could be a situation where, while they know the optics of the situation aren't great, and they're going to use this as a little bit of a smoke screen for another team that maybe wants to trade up for Jalen Carter at number 9 if he's available. But I think it's a really interesting situation. And I think people who are discounting the idea that there's a very real chance the Bears either draft Jalen Carter or that Jalen Carter could be available at 9 to where they could get a nice little trade up, I think you're fooling yourselves. We've seen some terrible people play in the NFL. We see terrible people continue to play in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like, Greg Hardy got a second contract. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that's right, but I'm saying that's like, the Cowboys and the Raiders exist. there's no other way around that,
Yeah.
So like, guys, naturally talented guys are always going to get a chance. And I mean, even Randy Moss, he had a lot of character issues coming out of the draft, turned out pretty fucking well.
And Randy Moss's was almost like don't be wrong, he made some mistakes, but to me his was more like an Allen Iverson, like, mislabeled, in my opinion. That's kind of how I see it. But Don Burr coming in Detroit versus everybody. Speaking of Detroit, that's a big reason why I don't think Jalen Carter makes it to the Bears. I don't think he makes it past 5 or 6, but I do want to wrap that that Kevin Warren part up, because like I said before, and I just want to reiterate, like, it's not like Kevin Warren is standing there at pro days like fucking with a timer and shit like that. That's not what we're saying at all. But let's put it in a different way. If there was smoke to that rumor, if there was a reality to that rumor that the Bears were going to take a different quarterback at number 1 overall and trade Justin Fields, that is a move that Kevin Warren and George McCaskey have to approve of. Like, you can't make that kind of move. We're talking about the big shit, right? Like, possibly drafting Jalen Carter. Like, for you to make a move like that, we're talking about the implications of the entire fan base, the implications of the entire organization. Justin Fields had the number 1 jersey being sold, I think his orange, blue, and white were all in the top 5 for jerseys sold last year. Like that's you don't get that kind of publicity or love, right? Just because you're drafted. Mitch never got that. So it's just the reality is Chicago has been starving for a guy like Justin Fields, and Justin Fields being here, is huge for the fan base, and it's been reflected in jersey sales alone. So making a move like that is something that for sure your president is going to have to fucking approve of, even if it's next year, even if Fields has a terrible year this year and the Bears are in striking distance again, that's something that's going to have to be passed. So to think that Ryan Poles or even Ryan Pace was just willy-nilly doing whatever the fuck they want with no checks and balances, you're out of your mind. And that's why we had 20 years of dog shit, because Ted Phillips were the checks and balances. And who knows with the way escrow works, and not to dive, get too off track, but the whole Lamar Jackson thing, someone came up with a great thread about how fully guaranteed contracts, like it's not like the MLB or NBA or anything like that. The NFL owners have to have that money in escrow. And he pretty much was saying, like, with the way the market has been and the economy overall, a lot of these owners have taken hits to their disposable cash on hand. And even the Deshaun Watson deal would not be able to be done this year. So that's a big part of why they're not able to give him the contract that he wants, because like these, especially the family owned type, the Bears, the Steelers, the Ravens, like those smaller, family owned type organizations that don't have these like rich, Saad Khans or whatever, that are the owner. They don't have as much cash on hand to be handing out those types of contracts. So, really cool. If I could find it, I'll retweet it so you guys can see it. But really cool thread. I thought it added some interesting perspective, but don't want to go off too much on a tangent there, because I do want to talk about really why I don't think Jalen Carter is going to fall to 9. I don't think he makes it out of I don't think there's any chance he makes it out of the top 10. And again, if I'm wrong, we'll clip this, we'll throw it out there and talk about how big of a stupid asshole I am. No problem. But I don't think he makes it out, because I agree with Drew, or I'm willing to take Drew Rosenhaus's advice here. He's the best agent in the NFL. He's been the best agent in the NFL. He talked about how he'd be able to get a Lamar Jackson deal done, right, on that same Pat McAfee podcast. So I think Jalen Carter's going in the top 10, and I don't think he makes it past 5 or 6. A big part of that is because I don't think the quarterbacks are going to go as high as people are anticipating. I do think we're going to see a run on them and might see 2 or 3 go in the top 4 or 5 picks. But every time we have seen a quarterback class like this one, or at least with this much hype, every single time one of those quarterbacks has gone like number 10 overall, or number 11 overall, number 15 overall. And even if you look at the 2018 NFL draft, you have Mayfield, Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen going at 10 overall, which is past where the Bears would be in terms of a trade down. And then even the 2019 or the 2019 draft, was it? 2020 draft. You had Tua, Herbert, you had Joe Burrow, and then you had Jordan Love was a really big name in that draft as well, right? He didn't go until the 20s. 2021, there was a ton of hype for this fucking draft class. You had Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, and then again, no one picked again until 11, which was Justin Fields and Mac Jones. So I don't think these quarterbacks are all going to go bunched up right there, which is going to leave room for other teams to pick other positions, whether it's the top tackle on their board or the top cornerback on their board, or whatever it may be, to the point where I think that we're really banking on that. If Carter were to fall to us, we're banking on all 4 of those quarterbacks going before the Chicago Bears pick. And then you need a couple other things to happen, right? Whereas, I think we're going to lose like 2 of those spots personally. You're on mute, Fatness.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to work ourselves into a shoot and discuss too much what we were talking about last week, because I feel like we covered quite a bit about this, especially in regards to quarterbacks and kind of the valuation with how many guys are going to get drafted in the top 10, and if a guy like Jalen Carter would end up falling out. I will say that I think I think a lot of the media hype is with these quarterbacks is surrounded around teams that potentially want to trade down and trade out of that pick. So that's why we're going to see teams, kind of hype up guys like, Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, which I still haven't seen Will Levis throw a tight spiral past 30 yards, but that's neither here nor there. I do think that that in theory, having more quarterbacks in the top 10 and the potential of those guys going in the top 10 is going to help us at 9 if we wanted to trade down, or even if we wanted Jalen Carter to fall to us. But I am not sure it's going to play out that way. I think Anthony Richardson, we've seen quarterbacks in the past, like the Josh Freemans of the world, or even the Jordan Loves of the world, who are great looking projects. You know what I mean? Great looking athletes, guys who have, if they can get going, can be like top end quarterbacks in the draft. We even saw with a Patrick Mahomes. You know what I mean? He was a guy who I believe he got picked at 10.
11.
Um, yeah, somewhere in that range. And it's always easy to be like, oh well, we all would have drafted Patrick Mahomes in the top 5. It's like, well, you're not an NFL GM. You know what I mean? It's a situation where teams looked at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who threw a pretty good amount of interceptions while in college, ended up his rookie year throwing a lot of interceptions in training camp and in practice. It was a situation where the Chiefs were maybe a little on the worried side about how many interceptions are thrown. Now he just happens to be one of the best quarterbacks in all football. And I don't want to give Bears fans any PTSD about fucking Patrick Mahomes because, we've all beaten that dead horse. But if a guy like Patrick Mahomes, with the type of arm that he had coming out of college, even with being the son of a former pro athlete, can fall out of the top 10, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis can fall out of the top 10. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
like that's the way people need to look at it. I understand, fans of teams in the top 10 wanting that hype to be surrounded around those quarterbacks, but if you're not CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, like it's a tough sell in the top 10. And who knows? Maybe you have a team like Washington that's desperate, because we do have these seasons where we're not quarterback heavy as much as people are selling us on, and we still see these teams get really aggressive to go get them. Ironically, I think Daniel Jones is a really good example of that, a guy that got drafted where he did, and a lot of people were kind of like, there's talent there, but there was just never that kind of
It was
polish.
a shock. Everyone was talking about, because the Giants had two first rounders that year. Everyone was talking about, oh, they could probably get Daniel Jones with that second one. And they were like, no, we're not going to fucking sit on our hands and hope to God we get the quarterback that we want. We're just going to take him at 6.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. A team could have convinced themselves into that. And I think a team like Washington, kind of like I referred to last week, is a team that, they really like Sam Howell, as I feel like they should. But they're a team that has a front office and a head coach that are kind of sitting on borrowed time right now. You know what I mean? They kind of need that oomph. They failed miserably on the Carson Wentz trade. Is this a team that kind of wants to move up into that top 10 if a guy like Will Levis or Anthony Richardson are sitting at 9? That's where that gets intriguing. And then you even have a team, kind of like a wild card, as we referred to before the show. Tampa Bay, we don't know what the mindset of Tampa Bay is right now. Are they cool with going with Kyle Trask for a year, kind of punting the year, and then going for a guy, going for either a more polished quarterback next year, or really seeing if Kyle Trask is the guy? Or have they seen enough Kyle Trask behind closed doors to know, no, this isn't the guy? Maybe he'll start first year while we have a, developmental guy like an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. But maybe we want to make that move this year because we still feel like we have enough talent that Anthony Richardson next year after sitting for a year, Will Levis for a year after sitting for a year, could have us back in the playoffs and potentially, going for a Super Bowl. While that might sound crazy coming out of our mouths, we don't know how these GMs think, and no GM is going to have the negative thought about their own team. It's usually going to be on the more positive side of things, especially if there's a little bit of worry about what the long-term future is for their job. We've seen aggressive moves by GMs over the years. But to kind of just wrap up the entire point, and then we can kind of start rolling into some of our mid-round guys. I do think the NFL draft's a crapshoot, man. I while I don't think quarterbacks are as highly touted as, some will make you believe, the top 2 are, and I think the top 2 are justified to be. But I think it's going to be a fall off there, and I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Jalen Carter ended up having a team trade up for that pick and go get him because they see him as a possibility for less of a trade, less of a haul that they would have to trade to go get him compared to where they would have thought they would have to go get him with that Arizona pick. Who knows? Maybe even Arizona's like, hey, we still think you're the most talented defensive guy in the draft, and we want the interior of our defense set for the next 10 years.
Duke, just a side note, Dylan threw that out there. I listened to us on Twitter. It sounds not bad, but I don't know if you want to just do an unplug or something with your mic and then plug it back in type thing, or untwist the cord, because there is like a little bit of static coming in at the end of each of your sentences. But no, to kind of build on what you were saying though, I do think the 2017 draft is a perfect encapsulation of how big of a shit show the NFL draft could be. You saw two running backs, which not a premium position, and Leonard Fournette going before Christian McCaffrey, both go before fucking Patrick Mahomes. And then you saw John Ross, Corey Davis, and Mike Williams go before Patrick Mahomes. And the team that traded up to go get Patrick Mahomes when Deshaun Watson was number one on everybody's fucking board for the entire fucking year, the team that traded up to go get Patrick Mahomes was the team that didn't need a quarterback, right? So you're looking at like it's like anything can happen, bro. Like there were a lot of teams that passed on Patrick Mahomes that could have used the quarterbacks, the Browns being one. Even Sam Howell, like you brought him up. That guy was supposed to be a fucking number one overall pick, and he just farted on his nuts his senior season or junior season, whatever that was, and became a third rounder. Like, it is such a fucking crapshoot. And, you know, we were talking about this pre-show, but there really is, like, I know draft day, you know, it's a heightened version of what the NFL draft is, but when certain things happen, like Aaron Rodgers falling is a perfect example. When certain things happen, bro, like a quarterback needy team passing on a quarterback that everyone had rated high, shit like starts to hit the fan. Like things start to turn out and get a little bit weird. So, you know, if that one team that traded up for Bo Callahan doesn't take Bo Callahan, it could cause Bo Callahan to fall, right? So there's just the optics don't necessarily always meet what the draft is going to be. So I think with that being said, you know, we can kind of move into some of this later round shit, or the mid rounds at least. Duke, are you good? Are you still playing with the audio? You need me to keep talking?
Oh, okay. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I hear you great now.
Yeah, no, Unknown Pro just shits on his nuts. I just listened to the YouTube playback, and my mic is fine, baby. I am making sound, baby.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just
it's just you, Dylan. Your Ohio Wi-Fi should probably really be put into consideration when you move to another state. You know, when you finally wake up and come to your senses, because you know Cleveland, Ohio, that entire area. Anyway, regardless, I'm not going to just sit here and shit on the state of Ohio. Joakim Noah has covered it fluidly. But you know, to a lot of your points, they're good points. But I kind of want to move past this point because we have
let's go. Let's move. Let's move into that mid round shit.
Yeah. So all right. So we have 5 picks in the top 103, and the reason I say 103 is because our last pick in the top 103 is 103, and I do think top 100 picks are something that are very important, especially when you look at trading back. Let's say we don't trade back currently. We draft either a Jalen Carter or a Paris Johnson or something like that with our first pick, or even if we trade back. What are some guys sitting at 53, sitting at 61, sitting at 64, sitting at 103? What are some guys just off the top of your head, Lucas, that you really want to take a chance to hype up that you think could really help the Chicago Bears and really be steals in some of these later round or some of these mid round picks?
See, yeah, and it's such a like loaded fucking question. But from what we're seeing in mocks and what we're seeing across, you know, every year I cross reference all of the major draft boards. And I take their average draft position, positional value, RAS scores, production scores, all of that shit, and I kind of compile it into different weights and take an average, and it will show you some guys that could potentially rise and fall, things like that. You know, guys like Darnell Wright that are finally starting to get that, you know, because Darnell Wright was looked at in the 60s for us. A lot of people, when they started mock drafts, they were getting him at the end of the second round, and it's like, no, that process changes. But right now, I think we're pretty close to locked into where some of these guys, at least projection-wise, are supposed to be going. And I think we're going to kind of – it's a little bit tough to not have 32. And I think we're all going to feel differently depending on who goes at that 32nd pick, especially if it's like someone like a Darnell Wright does fall that far. And, you know, you could have had Jalen Carter and Darnell Wright in the same draft, something like that. Not that I foresee that happening, but – at 53, 61, 64, that pool right there at the end of the second, beginning of the third, Zach Charbonnet is obviously the guy who I'm going to go with, right? Like, I think he's the best running back in the draft. I you know, people are going to fucking call me crazy because Bijan Robinson is the second coming of Christ, and I think he's a great, great prospect, Bijan Robinson. But if you watch him against Alabama or any elite type of defense, he might rely on his athleticism a little bit too much, and not on reads, keys, and things like that. That's just like you see him reversing field, you see him start to really have some bad habits that probably go back to high school when he was the best player on the field. He saw a wall, would be able to reverse field and outrun everybody, and that's just not how it is in the NFL. You're not going to be the most athletic player on the field. A lot of times, all 4 to 5 DBs are going to be more athletic than you, and probably a linebacker that you're facing up against. So that's just the reality of it. And I think Zach Charbonnet is built to fucking last. He reminds me a lot. If you were to put DeMarco Murray and Nick Chubb and make a hybrid, and the only reason why I say DeMarco Murray is because it's my one knock on Zach Charbonnet, and that's he runs a little bit up and down. Like, he does not have a low center of gravity, but he's like fucking 6'2", 2.25, and he brings a fucking load. Like, the way he breaks tackles and is able to make people miss, just from sheer strength and just hitting the truck stick, like, you would think he runs with a really low center of gravity. And I think he's actually just very patient, finding his way through the hole, navigating, and kind of, a little bit of what Khalil Herbert does. I hate to say it, but I think he could be a very good scheme fit. He doesn't play it a lot, and I do think he's got a lot more to him as a pass catcher. I think he's looked at as a bruiser and more of a David Montgomery, but if you look at him, he was one of the most athletic people in the score, or in the combine. His explosive scores were pretty much off the charts for someone his size. Everything that he did, I was very, very comfortable with, to the point where I would rank him number 1. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is number 2, to be honest. And that's another guy that, is getting. Dave Montgomery was supposed to be a second rounder. He went 72 overall. So I could see a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Zach Charbonnet falling there, no problem. Another guy I really like a lot too, Matthew Bergeron, out of Syracuse. He's out of Syracuse, right? But he's, kind of being projected as more of a guard, but I think he's very versatile in a sense where if you need to plug him in at tackle, because someone get injured, he can do that. I think he's even taken a couple snaps at center as well. So he's another guy that I really like, in that, second round where we're at. There's quite a few guys. Isaiah Foskey, I don't know if he makes it there. It is a deep D-line class, in edge class. So I do think there's going to be some guys that fall, just because all the really edge needy teams are going to take them up early. And then there's going to possibly be like a lull and then a run, like, towards that end of the second, beginning of the third, where you're going to get some quality players. At least that's what I'm fucking hoping for. Keanu Benton, your boy. And I'll hand you the steak after this, because Keanu Benton is one of my favorite D linemen. He's built like a fucking semi-trunk, but like I've said before, Coach Binzer, my D-line coach, we need you to be like a fucking mix of an Arabian gymnast and a silverback gorilla. And he's got really, really light feet, and he's actually very athletic for his fucking size. So Keanu Benton's the guy that I really like as well. It's tough though, because that's why I say it's going to suck to see 32 go, because if you don't take a tackle with that first pick, and I would hope they trade down and take a tackle, I'm not a huge fan of the quality of tackles that are being mocked in that area, right? Also, like Joe Tippmann too, a center. Over there, you can get a really quality center in general in that range, because they don't get picked too early. But that's kind of where my head's at right now.
Yeah, no, I'm loving the Wisconsin love. Keanu Benton, obviously, I'm pretty sure I've said on this podcast before, somebody I've been following for quite a long time. He actually went to high school in my hometown. So a guy I'm always going to root for, very instinctual, I think is the best way that I put it. There are big guys who kind of forget how big they are in the best way possible. And I think that fits Keanu to a T. When he's very nimble on his feet, can slip through double teams, but he can also force the issue and run coverage and really just kind of push through people and just wreak havoc. He's a guy who really helped the Jim Leonhard defense go. Jim Leonhard or really the Wisconsin defense, I feel like in the last like 7 to 8 years, and this predates Jim Leonhard a little bit because Jim came a little bit later. But they are a defense that just has a disgusting interior. really sets up your linebackers to be able to get free releases to in run coverage to be able to kind of maybe go through a fullback or get straight to the running back or get straight to a quarterback on a blitz. And I think Keanu Benton fits that to a T. And I think that fits really well with the Matt Eberflus type defense. So I think that is a name that if we don't get a guy like Jalen Carter with the first pick or with our first pick, that's a guy you need to pay attention to. And that's a guy that I'm starting to see a little bit more on mock drafts and Bears Twitter. And I really do like it because he is a guy who can definitely play up to his draft status. And I think he's somebody that's going to move up a lot of boards. Kind of moving back to running back though, and this is a name that I'm kind of sticking to as far as my favorite running back in the draft. You know, I know there's a lot of people who have really hyped up the Zach Charbonnets of the world. This guy Lucas Perfetti for sure. Definitely has some stock in Zach Charbonnet futures and all that fun
Just
stuff.
having meat, yeah,
100%. And like I think Charbonnet is a great athlete. You know, he looks the part. Is definitely that type of player. He actually started his career in Michigan, so he's got a little bit of that Harbaugh in him as well, which is something I always appreciate. But a guy that kind of reminds me of our fucking boy Tariq Cohen back in the day, maybe on a little bit slower of a scale, Deuce Vaughn. You know, if we're looking for just a weapon at the running back position, maybe not a running back one, maybe a guy that slips to the fourth round, even maybe at that 103 spot, maybe even a little bit lower if he continues to fall. Deuce Vaughn is one of the most explosive college football players I've seen in a long time. He absolutely wreaked havoc every single time he had the football. He can run with volume. There's multiple games over the past season where he had 20 plus rushes, multiple 100+ yards games. He's a receiver out of the backfield as well. He's a guy that, you know, yes, he sits 5'6", he's 177. He's not a huge guy. You know, there's just no other way around that. But, you know, I think you see the impact a guy like Tariq Cohen can have on an offense that we had. I see Deuce Vaughn as a poor man Tariq Cohen, and that's somebody that could really help our offense, especially with the running backs we already kind of have in the room. I think if you want to draft a guy in the mid rounds or even in the second round, if we were to make a run for that, we need to make sure it's somebody who's a playmaker. We can't just draft a generic running back with this pick. And I think Deuce Vaughn fits that role perfectly. You know, he reminds me a lot of another guy who went to Kansas State in Darren Sproles. And that's somebody that any offense, especially if you want to start really throwing the ball or even have a check down for a guy like Justin Fields and Deuce Vaughn in a shotgun set together in the backfield is just like I'm getting sweaty just thinking about that. Like it is something that could be an absolute fucking matchup nightmare for any defense on the face of the earth, especially when you consider what DJ Moore can do in a running back reverse or even set in motion. You know, I think there's a lot of possibilities you can go with there. You touched on my boy Joe Tippmann, obviously a center that I'm gonna hype to the absolute moon. And
any center with a mullet's gonna automatically have a hog in my eyes.
Yeah, no, and Tippmann's a stud, and Wisconsin centers have a pretty good history, especially a recent history. But honestly, since 2000, any Wisconsin center you draft, even if they're not world beaters, they're going to be solid. They're going to be in the mid tier of the fucking centers, top to mid tier of the centers in all football. So definitely a guy that I like. 6'6", 317. He's somebody that even if you wanted to, could potentially move to guard at some point. He's somebody that I like a lot. I think he's just an absolute stud. And he's somebody that can be a natural leader on the offensive line. And any Wisconsin fan who's watching this is going to absolutely hate me for bringing this up, but I also really like John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. I think he is an absolute stud. I think he is just a freaking bowling ball of a man who can just move people around and has helped Minnesota really lock in what they've been doing on offense over the past few years. I love his length. He has 32 and a half or 32.63 arms. He has big hands. Can get to the second level, maybe not the fastest center in the world, but somebody who can definitely get there. And even Luke Whippler, guy, God, I hate that Dylan just commented because it's the Ohio State guy, but definitely somebody who can get to the second level, definitely somebody who's helped Ohio State run the football. That's a guy that I think is somebody else we need to look at the core of it. We need to look at centers. We need to look at them early. We can't continue to try to band-aid this problem. We have not had a dominant center since Cody Whitehair was playing center, and even then he was having snapping issues. So like we need to address this. You know, this is something that's kind of carried over even from fucking Olin Kreutz retiring. Like we've just been band-aiding and band-aiding and band-aiding. You know what I mean? Roberto Garza getting moved to center was cool for a while, you know, and I'm talking ancient history at this point, but like we need that guy at center. We need that guy to be able to make calls at the line of scrimmage. It makes your quarterback's life easier. And you know, the people who will shit on Justin for, oh well, why can't he make his own calls? It's like it's not that a quarterback can't make his own calls, but when he gets a couple more seconds to be able to look at coverage instead of being able to look at blitz calls, it helps. It helps a lot, you know, and it's not something that a quarterback can't do. But look, ask a guy like Aaron Rodgers how he felt about having Jeff Saturday, or even a Peyton Manning, how he felt about having a guy like Jeff Saturday, because it was one less thing he had to worry about on the offensive line because he was able to just focus on coverages and make call audibles. So center needs to be addressed. And I'll let you kind of take the floor after this and bring up some more guys, but there is somebody, he's kind of on the Velus Jones side of things when you look at age. But if we're looking at an edge guy who could potentially fall, who I think if he was 2 years younger would be a potential first round pick, is Keon White out of Georgia Tech. This guy is an athletic monster. He is somebody you want on the outside of somebody you want on the edge. It's that simple. 6'5", 285, 4'8", 40. You know, does that set the world on fire? No, but he is somebody who just can use his pure athleticism to get through. He's not necessarily a speed rusher, but he will go through offensive tackles in the NFL at some point in his career. You can clip that and, you know, throw that in my face if you want to. Hopefully he doesn't get drafted to the NFC North outside of the Chicago Bears. But Keon White is a guy that I could see really rising. I also, and I just got all hyped up about Keon White, but Mike Morris out of Michigan is a guy that I really like as well. He's somebody who, if you wanted a more safe pick at that, you know, maybe didn't want to go the upside route, you maybe just wanted a safe 4-3 defensive end, I think Mike Morris could be that. Not the fastest guy in the world, but somebody who can definitely set the edge and make sure the slot or your corners or safety can get to a running back on the outside.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Mike Morris is rated pretty high on some boards and pretty low on some boards, but that's kind of the reality, right? Like it's just, and same thing with Deuce Vaughn. Like I've seen Deuce Vaughn really high on some boards and really low on some boards, whereas like Keon White has been more consistently in that second round, right? But it's like such a crapshoot where Velus Jones was a 4th and 5th rounder on many fucking draft boards, and he went in the 3rd, right? So if a team really fucking likes Mike Morris, they're going to take him in the fucking 2nd round instead of the 3rd, right? Like, so it's just kind of one of those things that's like, it's such a crapshoot because you don't know who's actually going to be where they're going to be. Right. Shout out to Wolf, our boy Justin Ross, that fucking he was pounding the table for, ended up going undrafted. So that was supposed to be like, you know, a guy that could have been a 4th, 3rd rounder. So it's such a crapshoot. And the reality is when you look at like that top 10, top 15, top 20, there's some variation, right? But a lot of the time that's the most consistent. And then as soon as you get into those mid to late rounds, it's just fucking all over the place, a complete clown show. One thing about JMS that I really like and stuff that you've heard is that he will be able to come on and take those calls. I wonder if he's still going to be there at 253. It seems like Weipler and Tippmann have their stock has risen while JMS has kind of gone down a little bit. And he was, you know, some people were mocking JMS in the 1st round earlier in the process. So, you know, I think the reality is we're going to take one of those 3 centers and one of those 3 spots, whether it's 53, 61, 64. It just makes too much sense, right? Like we cannot see hashtag Sam Mustipher anymore. Alap. We cannot see him anymore. And we have had stopgaps really since fucking Olin Kreutz. Like we've had nothing but band-aids since Olin Kreutz for the most part. And even Cody Whitehair, while he provided some stability, he wasn't like a true center. Like he's bad at snapping. Let's call it what it is, right? And that's why I think he could be a cap casualty after the draft happens. But overall, yeah, there's a few more guys I like, right? Like I think even at 53, because you know what we talked about before and what Ryan Pace did last year. He took the 2 best players on his board with his 2 first picks, and then he traded back and accumulated the masses. So I think realistically, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw
you could say that he cultivated mass, but continue.
I wouldn't be shocked if we saw cornerback and fucking tight end for our first 2 picks, and everyone's going to lose their fucking minds because everyone wants a defensive end, a defensive lineman, an offensive tackle, an offensive center, right? Like, I could see that happening. I could see Luke Musgrave, who in my opinion is the best tight end on the board, but Michael Mayer is probably going to go before him just because he goes to ND and Rudy wasn't an actual fucking guy and no one actually liked Rudy, right? Like, I'll just throw that out there for the ND fans. Like, your fucking hero is a false prophet. That shit is not true. He never got on the field. But I divulge, right? Like, we're not Notre Dame guys, clearly. I'm so sick of I'm so sick of that school for years. And it's really just Beat On that does it to me. Shout out to Beat On as well. But yeah, there's like someone like Luke Musgrave, I could see being there at 53. And I truly think, like, you want to add another pass catcher in the second round. I think your best available option is going to be someone like Luke Musgrave. Another guy that's been a huge riser is Jonathan Mingo. He's a fucking monster. He's as athletic as they come. Wasn't asked to do a ton in college, but he's one of those guys. And I think, like, when you were on board with Keon White there, like, that's a guy that the athletic potential is limitless. And while I don't want to take that risk in the top 10 with a John Ross, I would be more than willing to take that risk with one of our 3 picks in that bunch, right? Like, not all 3 of them, but definitely you could swing for the fences on one and miss, and it's not going to hurt too bad. But if you swing for the fences and you hit, it's going to multiply your and put you on a rapid pace. So Keon White is not someone I'm super high on, and Mike Morris is someone I'd rather have like snag a little bit later. But I see the appeal. I see why it's there. I think the age is, because of Valus, it's a little bit of a deterrence. Just because I put all my eggs in that guy's basket, and I didn't even know who the fuck he was, dude. I didn't hear his name until draft day. So, that's part of it. But a couple more guys that I really like in that area, right? We're seeing guys like Julius Brents. I would like to get our third cornerback there and have them compete with Vildor. Julius Brents is a guy you're seeing in that range. Another guy too, Eli Ricks out of Alabama, which he's not getting enough hype, and he's another one of those guys that's rated high on some boards and low on other ones. But no, I said I would watch it a lap. I'm not watching draft day every day. I said I'd watch it until the pick was traded, and it was traded early in the process. But yeah, I like Eli Ricks is a really good pick there. I like who else? I can't go off the top of my head with everyone. I said Keanu Benton already, right?
Yeah.
Heed Rice is another guy. He's a go up and get it type of guy, jump ball player. He's someone that I liked early on in the process. I do think he's limited in terms of separation, but when you toss a ball up to him, it's more of an 80-20 than like he uses all of his size. He doesn't play like Claypool, right? Like he uses all the size he has. He's going to go up and get the ball, opposed to, letting a dude who's 5'8" touch his waistband and then fucking try to catch the ball with his chest.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just kind of a couple guys that kind of pop out here. And to your tight end point, I think there's potential of a really good tight end falling in the 3rd to 4th round. And I think
too, yeah.
We have to monitor. I think it's quietly a really nice tight end draft. I also like the guy White out of Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's quarterback situation last year was just an absolute mess.
Like that. Something weird.
But like he is a guy that could really. He looks like an NFL tight end. He looks like a fucking animal. He honestly looks like an NBA power forward. And that's the type of guy you want at tight end. That's kind of a high upside, could he bust? Sure. But you got him in the 4th round. That's not a terrible pickup at all. I think that's someone you take a chance on. But honestly, 2 Illinois guys kind of popped in my head as you were kind of rolling here.
I love Sidney Brown, but go ahead. I know you're
I don't even think we're gonna have the same guys here. So Jartavius Quan Martin, as far as like a nickel corner, that's somebody who I really like, just a super freaking scrappy player. And as much as I hate to give Illinois credit, mainly because of their head coach, he is a guy who just did a little bit of everything. He can tackle, he can turn the ball over, he has an eye for the ball. He can force fumbles. He's a guy who's actually being projected to play some safety in the NFL. And I think that really bodes well at what you want at a nickel corner. He has some size, and I think everybody kind of has this prototypical idea that your nickel corner has to be like 5'9", 165 pounds soaking wet and can just, do shoestring tackles and blitz every once in a while, unprotected. But, to be able to have a little bit of beef at that slot corner spot is not a bad thing at all. And, we even saw it with Kyler Gordon this this year. You know what I mean? We saw the benefits of that. I still feel like the long-term idea is to play Kyler Gordon outside. And I think a guy like Quan Martin being brought in the third round, if he were to fall, would be a nice little spot. I also like Cameron Mitchell out of Northwestern, kind of similar. He didn't really play slot too much. He kind of played that other corner where he kind of had the tougher match, or, you know, he had a little bit of the easier matchup, but a pretty solid player all around at his time at Northwestern. And then kind of going back to running back, somebody I'm surprised I didn't bring up, Chase Brown, a guy who, listen, if you wrote your just prototypical NFL running back, just meat and potatoes running back that you want to get in that later round, you know, the kind of mythological, you can draft a running back at any point. Chase Brown is that guy you kind of want to grab before anybody else
I
does.
think he's going to go higher than a lot of people are anticipating.
Well, I think, you know, people kind of have this like stigma of him being, oh, he's Big Ten running back. He runs with a lot of power, but he doesn't have a lot of burst. Like, I don't know what necessarily they were watching. This is a guy that runs a 4.43. That was his official 40 time, 5'10", 209. Like, that is what you want, and you're just like fucking every down running back. You know what I mean? Just be able to pound it between the tackles, which is something, as much as I dislike Brett Bielema, and I will continue to bring up how much I dislike Brett Bielema because he's a fat slob. He's a guy who knows running backs. He knows a guy who can run through the tackles. Chase Brown is that type of guy. And if he's someone who even starts to slip at all in this draft, you have to go snag him. You know, if that's what you want out of a running back. He's a guy who could, you know, kind of sit for a year or two, you know, just take snaps when you need him to, but he's somebody who could kind of have that potential to, if you don't want to pay a running back down the road, you have a Chase Brown hanging around, get him on a cheap extension because he sat on the bench for a year and you're ready to roll there for a little bit. You know, I see a lot of teams kind of doing this strategy. We see with San Francisco, they have this guy start for a year or two, pop off, go get paid, and then they have another guy waiting in the wings. Chase Brown, if he falls, is a great guy to have in that situation because he looks like an NFL running back, man. And that's kind of what you want in that situation.
I think he's a stud. And I just want to comment because you're talking about the Illini guys. Like, Chase Brown's a stud, and he's getting mocked in like the beginning of the fifth. I think he goes in like the end of the third, to be honest, because what you described, right? Like, he is a true fucking back, like an NFL back. But when you talk about, you know, the corner, and I really like Sidney Brown a lot, any of these DBs that are like seniors right now, that means that Lovey got to them when they were freshmen and possibly sophomore, or they're a red shirt. If there's one thing Lovey can do extremely fucking well is develop a defensive back. Like, look at the kid out of Houston last year, right? They ended up going with him over Sauce Gardner. I'm blanking on his name right now. I don't know why. But either way, like, had one of the best seasons for a rookie.
I know who you're talking about. I can't think. He's got a little bit of a hard to pronounce last name.
Yeah, Stingley is his name.
Yes, Stingley. I loved him coming out of the process too, dude. He just animal.
You got to think.
Killed us too, by the way.
For sure. Someone, well, P Tire killed us as well. Our boy.
P Tire.
Yeah, but these DBs that Lovey gets to from a young age, like, he's an old school coach. Like, he was teaching them the right habits, and you see those habits, especially with a guy like Devin Witherspoon. So I'm really high on a lot of these older DBs, and if we can snag any of them late from Illinois, I'd be fucking all systems go.
Yeah, no, I'm under the same impression. You know, I don't want to sit here and talk about Illini the entire time because I'm going to get in trouble by Bears fans who are Illini fans because Brett Bielema walked into a great fucking situation because he had a team that was cultivated by Lovie Smith, you know, a guy who's coached in the NFL for a fucking long time. But I really do like a lot of these guys coming out of Illinois. Where that goes from there, that has yet to be seen. But speaking of another college that I'm just not a big fan of, that other Bears fans will hate me for, we were just shitting on Notre Dame, but a guy like Isaiah Foskey, man, if he falls, like, he's still a really nice little prospect, man. He's a guy who can get to the quarterback too. He's got pretty good size, nice little burst on the edge. Like, definitely a guy that I could see really making a really nice impact. Maybe not year one, but definitely somebody who can you know, do some work for us. As far as like a speed rusher that could fall potentially to like the late third, maybe the fourth round. I also do like Byron Young out of Tennessee.
I fucking love Byron Young.
Dude ran a 4.43. he's undersized. He's about 250. That's the only thing really working against him, dude. If he put on like 25 pounds and still kept that speed, he'd probably be a fucking he'd be a first round pick, easy. Maybe even hovering around that top 20 because like he has that fucking edge type. He has that edge. Like we talk about what we saw to Dominique Robinson last year. Byron Young is like Dominique Robinson, like on crack. Like he is a fucking dude who can just hit the edge like no other. Really good hand movement, and his raw athleticism does bail him out at times, but that's somebody that you can definitely cultivate. There's a lot of edge guys in this draft that I really do like. I believe Northwestern has one as well. Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name.
You're gonna try to pronounce, yeah. I was gonna say,
but he's a guy who definitely has a little bit more of that size. Kind of similar to Mike Morris, somebody that I like, a really solid pick, but he also has some bursts as well. He ran a 4.49. So,
well, one thing that I really like about Byron Young, right? So when I was watching the Alabama-Tennessee game, because there's a lot of fucking guys that could possibly be that number, well, especially when it was number 1 overall. So I'm looking at Bryce Young, I'm looking at Will Anderson, looking at, a few of the guys there, Darnell Wright, and the guy that to me had the best motor on the field, both sides of the ball, was Byron Young. Like when I was looking at Will Anderson, and I've had those critiques on previous episodes of Will Anderson, where I feel like when things drawn up for him, he's going to execute, but he doesn't have that motor to, when I'm getting double teamed, I'm going to try to get off this block and chase a guy downfield 10 yards, right? Like I didn't see that as much with him. Byron Young's got one of the best motors in the draft class, in my opinion, for the edge rushers. I'm glad you brought him up, because that's one of my other draft crushes. Not as high as Zach Charbonnet, but even Dylan would look, right now. Hyatt as well, right? Yeah. So, Dylan, I remember getting into it with him in the group chat, just being like, dude, like Byron Young's got a better motor than fucking Will Anderson, right? Like I'm not as impressed for number 1 overall. Number 9 now, Will Anderson's there. You fucking take him in the drop of a hat. There's no chance he's there, but yeah, Byron Young's one of those guys that I thought really stood out on tape. And same with Eli Ricks. That's one of the guys that I brought up. Those were the 2 guys where I'm like, both these guys are really good fucking players, and they're not getting the hype that their teammates are getting. So, yeah, Byron Young, I'm a big fan of. I'm sorry if I cut you off. You got a couple more players, I'm guessing.
No, you're good. It kind of even on the Tennessee thing, I feel like I need to bring up Jalen Hyatt. Obviously a guy that I'm pretty big on. I don't think he's going to be available at the time we're going to want to draft a wide receiver, but if he starts to slip, that's a guy you really have to consider just grabbing. Sure, maybe that we just have an abundance of riches at the wide receiver room, but in a year for Justin Fields like this, that's a fucking good problem to have. And people who want to get turned off by a Tennessee tight end because of Valus, like, you're doing yourself a disservice if you think lowly on Jalen Hyatt. Anyone who loves JSN, and wants to draft JSN in the first round or trade down and still draft him, maybe consider the picks you would get for trading down and then drafting a guy like Jalen Hyatt in the second round instead. You just go watch some highlights. Go watch his full game against Alabama. And I know that's always kind of like this measuring stick for guys in the SEC. Is like, oh, well, he played great against Bama. He played great against Bama. Got to go watch that Bama game. Jalen Hyatt kind of brought it to a new level against Bama. I remember, I don't know. I remember last year with Treylon Burks, me really being high on his Alabama game, but you could look at film across the year that he looked great in. Jalen Hyatt set that kind of to another level. So that's one you really need to look at. Cedric Tillman, good size, but Hyatt's definitely the guy coming out of Tennessee you really want to look at. As far as other guys that I've kind of been trying to pay attention to, I do like Deonte Banks out of Maryland. I don't think he's going to be there when we're going to want to draft corner, but if he's a guy that ends up falling, there are a lot of corners that are kind of projected to fall into that first, second, or third round. So potentially if there's a run, a lot of these guys could be off the board, but I've always found that, when there's that many guys that are kind of projected in that area, you're going to have a couple that are going to end up falling. And if you can get one of these guys, like even a Clark Phillips, if that's how you wanted to fill your slot role, or Cameron Mitchell, as I brought up earlier, you're even like an Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. If they end up falling like that third, fourth round area, that's something you really kind of have to consider. But yeah, no, it's funny because like we've gone on this tangent. We haven't even talked about offensive tackles. I know we talked about it a little bit. But really, even just kind of looking outside of the Darnell Wrights of the world, the Paris Johnsons of the world, the Peter Skorinskis of the world, the guys that are obvious that I feel like we talked about last week as well. There's some other guys out there. Ryan Hayes is somebody that I've kind of been a fan of. Like I said, would like to see him eat a couple cheeseburgers. I think 6'6" and 298 just a little small for my liking at tackle. Maybe hit that 310 area, and I think we're in fucking business. I think Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse as well. I think that's a guy that you're pretty high on. It's another guy I'd really like. I think he kind of had the disbenefit of playing on a team that's Syracuse in 2023. You know what I mean? There's just no other way around that. Syracuse just isn't like the hype around it isn't what it used to be, and mainly is the conference that they play in. But even like an Andrew Voorhees out of USC, that's
a great pick in my opinion, because his draft stock's fallen a lot since he tore his ACL, and that's someone I would be willing to stash, especially if we have an extra pick. We trade down once, and he's still sitting there in like the fourth. I think he could be. I think realistically, his draft hype would have fucking skyrocketed during this process if he doesn't get hurt, and I think he would have been like a second, third round pick. If you can get him in like the fifth and stash him, that's huge. Couple tackles that I know a lot of people are interested in that are in that mid-round range are Blake Freeland and Jalen Duncan. Both are huge dudes, right? And they fit the athletic profile a lot more of what Ryan Poles seems to like. When you look at Braxton Jones and a couple of the offensive linemen he is drafted, they do fit that athletic profile a little bit, being a little bit smaller in the light 300s, but both being tall fucking dude. Like one Blake Freeland's like 6'8", like 310 or something like that. He's crazy big. And both were productive in college, right? So those are some guys that you see in the mid rounds. But I think it does matter strategy wise what you take in those first couple picks. Like if you stick and pick at 53 and 9, depending on what those positions are, I think then you're going to start to see kind of some double ups, right? We might see 2 tackles back to back or something like that in the mid rounds to kind of make up and get a couple shots at some of those positions of need, depending on which ones we address early in the draft. So, I think there's some decent talent out there. One guy that I think is very, very good, and he pulled his cock out at the Senior Bowl. I don't want to butcher his name. I know Dylan's going to love this one, but where is he at? His name, I'm trying to get it in front of me because I know what it is, but I'm terrible at it. Olusegun Oluwatimi. He's the center from Michigan, and he tore it up at the Senior Bowl. I did not get it right. He's one of those guys that's getting picked in mock drafts in the 4th, 5th round. I think he can go as early as the 2nd. I think he's comparable to the Tippmans and the Weiplers and those types of players. So another guy that I really like on the offensive line that is getting mocked late, but who the fuck knows where he goes, right?
Yeah, I mean that's you're always gonna see those Senior Bowl guys kind of hype it up. But like if you watch Michigan last year, like there's just so much solid like big boys out there, honestly, both on the offensive defensive side of the football. So like really, really with a lot of those, if you can get someone like that late, you usually have a pretty good idea that they're well coached. Say what you want about Jim Harbaugh, but he usually has a pretty good coaching staff out there. So that's somebody you can kind of, and I'm going to use the word again, the lab, cultivate. I do want to say something about Blake Freeland, because while his size is enamoring to a lot of people, and I think he's somebody that a lot of people are really hyped up about, he didn't play well against Notre Dame. And I thought it was significant how not well he played against Notre Dame. So maybe that's something that turns me off of him a little bit. He's a guy that I wouldn't feel totally comfortable about starting right away. But I do think he projects as a right tackle in the NFL. I don't think he really has any other spot he should be playing. I don't think he can set the edge well enough at left tackle. And I think that works well, having a guy like Braxton Jones, who I think is set at left tackle, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a pretty damn good left tackle for us. But if we were to get a guy like Blake Freeland, I would just hope that we have another plan in place for starting in the first year. I mean, is that a situation where, we want to sign a vet, a little bit later in the process, kind of similar like how we did with Reef? Is that something where we think Borum could be a another year we put it right tackle, which I really wouldn't love to see that. But I am intrigued by Blake Freeland's size and his athleticism. I think he is an athletic guy that can get to the second level. And I know every time I bring up an offensive lineman, I bring up getting to the second level, but it's because it's a fucking insanely important aspect of the run game.
Yes.
I don't think people. I think people get the idea you can just put giant people on the offensive line and it'll all just work out, and it just doesn't. But yeah, I think if we go with Freeland, that's somebody that we need to have another plan at right tackle for sure.
Yeah, and that's someone that I would assume that they bunch with him, right? And that's kind of why I didn't like the free agency strategy as much, because if you really were trying to have it match up where your valuation meets evaluation bullshit, right? Like, and that person was a tackle, whether it's at 9 or a trade, whatever it is, right? Like, I do think the bulk of all those guys that you want to bring in and start right away are going to be gone before 53, to be honest. You might get lucky and have someone slip, but I feel like it kind of backs you into a corner a little bit, right? And same thing with these edge rushers. Like someone like Foskey, I would love for him to be at 53. He could easily go at 35, right? Like that. It's just like there's guys on there that we like, and that's why it's hard. And it's almost like, would you rather have the best center or the 7th best tackle, right? Like, what do you think is going to be? And there's a possibility that the 7th best tackle is better than the best center in the draft or has a better career, no doubt, right? It's a crapshoot, but it's just that's why the free agency does play into the draft, and that's why it hurts a little bit because even if you were looking at our wide receiver core, like I wouldn't want to add to it early, but there's a couple guys there that if they're there in the second, like a Jalen Hyatt at 53, some people are mocking him in the first, some people are mocking him in the early 30s. That's where I think he goes, just because of his size. But like we've seen a lot of small guys that are separators go early. Look at fucking Henry Ruggs. I know his speed was a little bit fucking different, but I don't think Hyatt's that far off in terms of athletic profile. So it's one of those things where, I would like to see like there's a group here of running backs in general, I think in the second round that are going to go right around that range where it's like, well, are you going to cut Homer or are you going to cut one of these guys? Or are you going to roster fucking like you paid 2 running backs? I know that they're incentive based contracts, but you paid 2 running backs and a fullback. Like, do you really want to cut one of those guys? I don't know, right? Like, but if Zach Charbonnet's there at 53, or even Tajay Spears or Jahmyr Gibbs, like, fuck, dude, that's probably going to be the best player on the board. And that's because of, there is a little bit of that positional value and premium position bullshit, right? That's why you're looking at, and that with that second pick. And that's why I fucking want 32 so bad, because you can easily get a tackle and an edge rusher that make you feel comfortable as a fan with 9 and 32, or even if you trade back and you can solidify like a defensive tackle and a fucking edge rusher, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, and then all of those later picks you have, it's like, yeah, we can get a center there, we can get a running back there, we can get a fucking cornerback there, right? It's just it sucks balls, dude, to not have that pick. And everyone's predicting a Clay. I hope he goes off, man. Like we've beat this point relentlessly. Like I loved him as a prospect, but giving up 32 was fucking idiotic to get one. Because if you truly do believe that it was going to take him a full season to get up to speed, you gave up a fucking 4-year contract of a first round talent essentially for 1 year of service from a guy that was kind of, having fucking character issues with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't just let fucking guys go like that, especially if they're super talented. So they took on George Pickens and gave up Chase Claypool. And they're probably more into, someone being like a tough guy than fucking freaking out on TikTok and shit. But that's a whole nother issue, right?
You went on a little bit of a Claypool tangent there, but
no, but it's just if we had that pick, it changes the draft so much, man. It really does open everything up for the Chicago Bears, in my opinion. And not having that earlier second round pick hurts a lot, bro. Because if you have that earlier second round pick, then 61, 64, like that would be fucking huge if you just gave up 53 instead. Like then you can say, okay, cool. Tajay Spears is there. And I also really like one of these wide receivers, or I really like one of these corners, whatever it is. I want to stack. I actually like another tackle that fell. Like it gives you just so much more versatility, which hurts. But I'm gonna,
Well,
you know,
yeah, and I mean, I feel like to your point, like if we still had that pick, it would open us up to be able to take more shots later in the draft because we wouldn't feel as dire to get great talent onto the team. So like because whenever I look through the draft process, there's still probably some guys I'm going to probably find before we hit draft day that are kind of hovering later in the draft that it's like, wow, this guy looks great. You know what I mean? Like he just looks like a football player. Maybe he just wasn't put in the system. Like, even just talking wide receivers, there's a guy that always just kind of sticks out to me. Somebody who was at LSU for a couple years just could not crack the starting wide receiver position. Obviously, because LSU, they're kind of a bit of a factory or whatever, but goes to Nebraska and just goes absolutely nuts, man.
I
Trey
was gonna say
Palmer,
bring him up, dude.
dude, Trey Palmer late in the draft is I would be ecstatic over that pick.
I like him a lot, bro, and he fits the exact like size. Like everyone that Poles has kind of drafted has been that 6 foot, 200-pound guy that kind of runs pretty hard after the catch and shit. Like I fucking like him a lot, bro.
Yeah, and I mean it just gives more weapons, man. That's more speed. That's someone you can line up in the slot out of shotgun and fucking do an end around with. And this guy has just ridiculous speed if a team's not fucking completely ready for it. You know what I mean? It's somebody you could have certain packages, similar to how we kind of projected a guy like Bayless Jones to be used. That's something. But with having Claypool on the roster, it makes taking chances on guys like that very difficult, and especially when we don't have the draft capital to do it, use it. But he's a guy that I'm surprised he does not have more hype.
I'm
Just
very
because
surprised as well.
like he's the typical story. He's a guy who went to a big university, was a highly touted guy, could not get on the field because they had other highly touted guys that maybe had better repertoire with quarterbacks or had better repertoire with coaching. Go somewhere else to prove that he's that guy, and he went and fucking proved he was that guy. And he's somebody that I like a lot. Kind of closing out here, and this is definitely the final points I'm really going to have with a lot of this stuff. At least for now, we can definitely get a little bit more into it as we move forward. But I know the Bears are kind of set at quarterback right now with even their backups. Bringing back Peterman and signing the dude out of Carolina. I think that kind of sets us up at quarterback. But there are two guys who I feel like we could have brought into this offense through the draft. A guy specifically who I'm going to bring up first, who I think is going to fall, just based on his passing statistics not being like great his senior year, but has shown a lot of promise over the course of his career, and a guy that we're all familiar with, especially me and you, Lucas. I think a guy like Malik Cunningham being a guy, being Justin Fields' backup, a guy that you can kind of, and I'm going to use that word again a lot, cultivate, kind of just have sit there, learn the same offense that Justin's learning. Definitely more of he doesn't have the arm talent that Justin has, but as far as being able to be a mobile, athletic quarterback and being able to do a lot of similar things in the run game that Justin does, he's somebody you could even put in, to kind of spell Justin in running situations if you wanted to kind of have him be a threat and even, use him that hand off. I think if you want to look at the revolution of running quarterbacks in the NFL, you should look at the DC Defenders in the XFL and see how they're running their quarterback system, because I think it's very intriguing. I know everybody wants to look down at the XFL, but I think that's an offense that we look at what the Chicago Bears did last year and how they used Justin Fields and how Justin ran for 1,000 yards, and we kind of see that a little bit more common in the modern NFL. I think having two quarterbacks that can move like that and being able to kind of spell them out every once in a while, as crazy as it sounds, it's something that can really be dangerous and really keep defenses on their heels. If you don't like the XFL, I highly recommend going and watch DC Defenders, because the way they run their quarterback system is something that I could see us doing with a guy like Justin Fields. But I think Malik Cunningham is a guy that's going to fall in this draft just because of he didn't really get it done with his arm last year, but he's somebody that I feel like would be able to be like a good, and I think WalterFootball.com has the best comparison of him, kind of like that Tyler Huntley role, can kind of just hold it down if Justin were to get injured. And then obviously DTR out of UCLA, a guy that we both
Cat
really
Hawk.
like. Yeah, he's a guy. He's a guy who definitely does it more with his arm. I think people really give him a lot of flack for what he does out of the pocket. I think he thinks run first a little bit too often. Isn't really able to set his feet as often as you'd like to see him, and that's probably why he's a little bit lower on the draft board. But that's somebody you just stash for a couple years, And I think people need to get out of the idea that if we were to draft a quarterback or if we were to bring in a good backup, that's not a detriment to Justin Fields. That's just setting yourself up for success. You know what I mean? Like look at what Washington did with RG3 and Kirk Cousins. You know what I mean? Like there's just no other way to go around it. And I'm not saying the Bears should draft a quarterback in the third round.
There's Rex Grossman and fucking
Kyle Orton.
Kyle Orton, baby.
Like it's just there's a lot of situations where that ends up working out. And it's kind of like you have no intention of a guy like Kirk Cousins or Kyle Orton really getting meaningful snaps, but when they need to play meaningful snaps, they end up looking pretty damn good, and they end up looking like somebody that you almost move forward with. And while I don't think Justin will ever find himself in that situation, as a GM, you always want to set yourself up to have that kind of ideal setup. Even look at the Packers in the late 90s. Like with Brett Favre. Obviously, Brett Favre was their quarterback, but look at how many fucking quarterbacks came out of that, man. Matt Hasselbeck, Mark Brunell, Aaron Brooks. Like there was like a factory there for a minute. And that's just a good problem to have. Because even
came out too, right?
What's that?
Flynn came out of that too, right?
Who?
Or was that during Aaron Rodgers? That was during Aaron Rodgers. Flynn, the guy that got paid for.
Oh, yeah, Matt Flynn.
Seattle.
Yeah, that was the Rodgers era. Yeah. And like I hate to bring up the Packers in a Bears podcast, but like it's a good problem to have. And you can usually, if they do look good enough, convince a team to give you picks for them. You know what I mean? Or like any sort of thing like that. It's a good problem to have. And I think it's something that I was kind of looking forward to before we ended up kind of attacking the quarterback position the way we did. Not because I'm not a Justin Fields guy, because I feel like it should be well noted at this point that I fucking love Justin Fields, but because it sets yourself up to be able to do a lot of different things, whether you're using him as a weapon every once in a while, or you're trading him for a third round pick because he looked really good in the preseason for him,
Yeah. And I think you really see a lot of the good organizations try to draft and develop talent late in the draft. It maybe once every 20, 25 years, you'll find a Tom Brady, or, once every 40 years, you'll find a Tom Brady or a Brock Purdy. But if you do it every fucking year, you're increasing your chances. Right. And so, I just think with what you see getting drafted in the 7th round, as much as I love Elijah Hicks and the energy that he brought, it's probably a chance he gets cut this year, right? As a 7th round pick, and us inserting a lot more talent, and there might not be enough roster spots, and he might be a practice squad guy, where last year at the end of the year, he was fucking on the fucking field, right? So a lot changes, but I do think like taking shots at that quarterback every single year, whether your quarterback's good or not, because unfortunately, someone could get hurt bad and never play again. Like it's just the way it is. Like you always have to be prepared, and what better way than making insignificant investment that can pay out big at the most important position in football? And we just have not seen that in our years as Bears fans, like consistently drafting quarterbacks, whether it's, maybe you're really high on a guy and once in a while you take one in the 3rd round thinking like, hey, if we can get him looking good in the preseason 2 years from now, he might turn into a 2nd rounder for us, or we'll get our return on investment, right? Or maybe he fucking surpasses Fields and now he's our new starter. Like anything can happen, right? But you're never going to, if you want to keep that competition and not make it like, hey, we're going to have a Chase Daniel back up Mitch Trubisky, so there's nothing pushing him, there's nothing there. What a better way to push Justin Fields than surround him with young guys with similar skill sets that just need to hone their craft in. So it's like, hey, I'm right fucking behind you. If you find a really hard worker, that's what it comes down to, right? Like a lot of these guys are talented enough to get there. What's their confidence like? What's their skill set? And how are they utilizing that skill set? How do they fit into your offense? Like all of those are determining the success of the actual player. But a lot of these guys are getting drafted for a fucking reason. It's not just like out of left field because, they're the coach's son shit is no longer here in the NFL. Motherfuckers' jobs are on the line, right? So I just feel like that's what I would like the Chicago Bears to do, and that's maybe not every year, but once every other year, right? Like get a quarterback, whether it's in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth round. Just keep that room fucking young and blossoming with talent. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the way you have to look at it is, especially at the quarterback position in college, like if you're on a bad offense, it doesn't matter how good of a quarterback you are. If you straight up do not have the talent, like the talent differential in a lot of these college football, like programs and a lot of these conferences, like you could be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. If you don't have the talent, and like the talent is that insurmountable on the other side of the football, like if your wide receiver cannot get separation at all, like you're getting smacked every 2 seconds because like fucking Will Anderson's, you're fucking a guy who should be playing D2 football is blocking Will Anderson. Like, yeah, you're not going to be able to have the opportunity to shine. That's why you get a guy that's how a guy like Brock Purdy comes out, because like Purdy at Iowa State, like they do have a lot of good players come out of there, but like, are they ever like a top fucking 10 program? Absolutely not. It's a situation where like the guys like that are going to fall under the radar. They're insanely talented. And a lot of people who watch strictly what they do on a game to game basis can see that, and I think, I don't see the harm in taking chances on that. I just don't. And you're right. And I brought it up in the group chat the other day. Why the hell don't we take more chances at late round quarterbacks? Like I can count on one hand the amount that we have. Like David Fales, who I have to double check. I don't even know if he was drafted. He might have been undrafted. Nathan Ederle, who yeah, sure. A lot of you probably don't know who Nathan Ederle is, but there's a good reason for that. Kyle Orton.
I think
That's getting to be about it. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude, and yeah, no,
I was Caleb Haney drafted.
I think he might have been like a fifth rounder, to be honest.
That's four in my life. And like I'm kind of thinking like fucking almost 20 years. You know what I mean? I'm not going to consider the Jim Miller, Chris Chandlers of the world anything that I'm going to fucking worry about. But like Craig Krenzel, there's 5. You know what I mean? Like we shouldn't have to think this far back. We see teams like even the New England Patriots when they had Tom Brady constantly bringing quarterbacks
That's
in.
the thing. Yeah, it's one thing if you're bringing in a first rounder, then and your quarterback's getting old, i.e. the fucking even the Chiefs, then there's some shit happening there, right? Like that quarterback's time is limited. But if you're bringing a guy in, I mean, even the second's kind of high with like Jalen Hurts, there was some implications there, right? Like if Carson Wentz keeps going in the wrong direction, they're going to see what this kid has. But like that third round and beyond, I think it's fair game. Now, I don't think you should be using a third rounder fucking every other year on a quarterback, but if you take one this year in the 5th round and one next year in the 3rd round, like it's giving the quarterback enough of a hint to be like, hey, we're going to keep this room competitive, but also not like, hey, we're trying to fucking replace you, right? And I think you find that sweet spot really in that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, right? So,
well, at the end of the day, if we're just going straight by the numbers, if you're paying your quarterback the most money on the team and he gets injured, what are you just going to completely pack it in for a year? You're going to have a fucking, you're going to have a Chase Daniel just take over. No, you need to cultivate talent. Like it's that simple. You need to be able to have a strong quarterback room. Like I don't think there's any doubt that even like if you draft a quarterback in the 3rd round next year, I'm assuming at that point everyone knows Justin Fields is that guy, and there's absolutely no fucking threat about that. But that guy coming in the 3rd round quarterback is still going to be like, well, I'm still going to fucking push it and practice every single day just in case I ever get a shot and I'm ready. That's a good problem to have. That's how we get these Cinderella stories where top quarterbacks get injured. You have the next guy up coming in who's been busting his fucking ass, and he just he runs with it. Brock Purdy's of the world, Tom Brady's of the world. But all right, kind of beating that point to death. We are running a little bit long. Lucas, do you have any final thoughts before I close this out here?
No, I could just destroy my meat to this fucking draft all day long. So an hour and a half, I think, is a pretty good update for the few that watch.
Yeah, no, I mean we had a pretty nice little nice viewing party. Oh, yeah. By the way, speaking of which, as we close ourselves out here, we are going to be watching the draft live. We hope to see a lot of you there. Whether you're dropping in the chat, we'll have some people join the chat as well on video. If you are a fan and you want to drop in, just shoot us a DM or something like that. We'll see if we can make it happen. Just don't say anything profane or offensive so we don't have to ban you or something like that. Like don't be coming on here wild, and you know what I mean. But
don't do that at all.
Yeah, please don't, for the love of God. Even that Lions fan, we might bring him on too. You know, we don't know. We might just get real froggy with it. But this has been the Barely There podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Barely There Pod. If you like what you've been listening to, be sure to like on YouTube, subscribe. If you do subscribe on YouTube, be sure to hit the bell. You'll be the first one to know when we go live. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify. Give us a rating over there on Spotify. Apple ratings on Apple work as well. Anywhere you want to rate us. Google Play, you might have to carve it in the stone, but if you want to carve us like 5 stars into like, you know, some hieroglyphs like in the side of a mountain, like we'd appreciate it. We'll find it one day. We'll probably have archaeologists do that for us, but we'll find her. Appreciate all the Google Play listeners, of course. I've been Duke Coughlin. You can follow me at that pod guy Duke. As always, I'm joined by the Ayatollah of Capicola, the Swami of Salami, Lucas Perfetti. You can follow him at Lucas Perfetti 46. This has been the Barely There podcast, and bear down.
Bear down.